Geography. I was born in Russia, actually. I lived in the Soviet Union for a while, so I'm very familiar with the so-called um, not socialist model, but communist model. And I've seen the Russia's transformation in the Western model. I've been in America for around 7 years, not more. Then I started studying psychology and economics, and that's partly how my interest in economics, or rather macroeconomics. I don't deal with like details. I kind of deal on a larger scale economics. It just kind of appeared, and I started reading a lot about it. I am largely self-taught because I wasn't finding economics taught at school as something that I would actually believe in. So I started reading. I don't know if you're familiar with MMT, modern monetary theory. So I basically started following the economists, like Joseph Stiglitz, Rubini, the people who were actually making sense. Um, so and then I started writing a lot on Facebook. People started listening, following. so so that's how
similar to what I
really. I almost feel like citizens of. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. And I think that's really important because I think a lot of citizens just leave the very important decisions to people who they think know better. And if you look into it, you actually start discovering that they might actually not be as clever as what they make themselves out to.
It's true.
They might just serve certain interests, that
Sure, exactly.
Like for example, me and Alex, there is a very big debate in America right now regarding debt ceiling. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yeah, of course.
Basically, fiscal basically we are saying that we spend a lot of money, which is true, but unfortunately that spending is not done for the larger majority of people. It's basically spending on military, it's spending on banks, it's spending on things that really have no relation to our standards of living. But yet we taxpayers are not paying. Yeah.
Actually, part of my article, I think, deals with that in a kind of a broader context. Because all this fiscal lubrication and quantitative easing and all that kind of stuff, it's not actually doing what it's supposed to be doing. They're doing it because they're trying to stimulate demand and get the economy going. But the money's not getting down to people. The money's going to banks and it's going to big businesses and all of the supply side. But it's not actually stimulating demand in the business. You've got this thing where you've got inflation, massive inflation in America, but you're not seeing any price rises. So it's like the government's pumping money into the economy, but that money's not actually stimulating demand, and the prices aren't rising. You're finding this great inequality is getting worse and worse. And I believe that wage compression, which would limiting the gap in wages in each company, would actually make a big difference because it would actually start getting that money down to the people, and then you find this kind of illusion of the value of the dollar at the moment, which is kind of illusionary because there's so much money on the market, but it's not actually reaching the people. So we find that the dollar would actually start having a bit of a more real value.
Mm-hmm.
In economics, we have monetary policy and we have fiscal policy. Monetary policy, what you just described, when the money given to banks, and fiscal policy, when the money are actually spent in the economy or given to people who will spend that. mean, if you look at actually who spends the money, it's the poor people, it's the middle class people, those are the spenders.
Mm-hmm.
So right now the money are channeled not to the spenders that can revive the economy and make it grow, but to the people who will either speculate or, just put them into bonds or market, because if you look, the market is actually going up. The market is pumped up.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's the general economy that is dying, and the artificial economy that is, corporations have the highest profits for the past several
Yes.
days and stuff like this. So, money are there, but money are not being spent. They're being accumulated and being wasted on derivatives, on trading, on speculation, stuff like this.
Yeah.
And, most of companies that I
Which is
cheated
quite
on.
dangerous because if they keep doing that, it's just going to keep inflating the dollar supply, and there's going to be still no demand, and eventually, at some point, the bubble's going to burst. So, I mean, from an outsider's perspective, that's how I see it. I don't kind of see any other, unless maybe you can help me out. I don't see any other way.
You're absolutely right. I think a lot of times, guys, what is kind of missing from a lot of textbooks is economic history. And I think that's very important for us to remember. How did it come to the fact that US dollar right now is the dominant currency? It's the currency most of energy is traded in, because realistically speaking, with our amount of spending, our interest rates should have been already sky high. This is what happened to Greece. This is what happened to Ireland. When the markets attack the country that spends a lot of money but doesn't bring in revenues, the interest rates have gone up. Our interest rates are very low right now.
Yes.
Right? So we are not really functioning in a true market reality. So we need to ask why this is not happening. And what happened is that, Bretton Woods Agreement, when the US dollar basically became like de facto gold standard in the world, most of countries right now are forced to buy US treasuries.
I missed what you said just
About what?
Just go back a couple of sentences. You were talking about the Bretton Woods and
right. Well, after World War II, when World War II, when all of Europe was kind of in ruins, America emerged as the strongest economy because it was least destroyed. It had its economy intact. It was neutral. Russia, Europe, they're basically all in collapse. So American dollar, it was decided, would be as de facto gold standard. Instead of gold, American dollar would be. Do you hear me?
You keep breaking up. Yeah, I'm sorry. The line is not so good. But from what I'm gathering is that you were saying that the American dollar became at Bretton Woods, which I'm not sure is true, because I think it wasn't the gold still the standard.
Yes, we went
until the 1970s.
Yeah, we went off from gold standard. I think it was Nixon in 1971 because we had so much debt.
Yeah.
I believe it was the war with Vietnam. We spent so much money that we couldn't pay our debt in gold. That's why we had to get off the gold standard. What I'm saying is that US dollar wasn't gold. It was de facto gold standard. US dollar was pegged to gold. And it was considered to be as good as gold. Basically, it was the economy that was the strongest, and most of the world decided to use it as a gold standard. Which we went off, and that gave us ability to start printing money, and stuff like this. But I just wanted a bit of an economic history because the reality is that, like I said, we spend so much money that our interest rates should have been so much higher. But because U.S. dollar is the reserve currency. Other countries have to recycle their currencies.
Yeah.
They have to buy U.S. dollar. You know, and
Do you
that
think?
creates this huge disbalance
They have
in
to
the world.
pay dollars, yeah, exactly.
Do you think the U.S. The dollar will not be the accepted currency at any point in the future?
But do you want to answer that first, and then I'll say what I think? That U.S. dollar
That's a
will
tough
not
one.
be.
There's been a lot of talk about that, and I've read a few kind of controversial articles about that being behind a few of the wars that have taken place recently.
Mm-hmm.
The threat that the countries might go to the gold standard or go to the euro as the standard or something like that. I'm not sure. I don't know if it makes sense to keep buying dollars when you know that the real value of the dollar is not as much as what's on the surface is, because there's so much of it around. There's trillions of dollars around.
Yeah.
But then, but I mean, don't you feel that the fact that we have so many military bases all over the world, and basically IMF and World Bank require countries kind of buy dollars in a way to be in the system?
Yeah, but that's the way that the system is, exactly. Sure.
Well, I mean, I've read a lot of
And I guess I have one more question.
So you know what? There's such a big delay. There's a few seconds delay between the two of us, so I keep interrupting you halfway through, and I'm sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah, so we'll just speak slowly. So if anyone wants to jump in, we'll be able to. But I guess I just have one more follow-up question to that. If the U.S. does lose their currency being the international currency, what do you think the effects on Americans would be, or on America?
Well, it's going to be horrible. It's going to be absolutely horrible. What will happen is that our interest rates will go way up, which basically means that as our dollar loses its value, the price of everything will jump. So the inflation will be just, huge. It will be
Right.
just basically, the standard of living will plunge even lower than what we have right now. I mean, basically it's going to be mayhem if that will happen.
Right.
So I think that's why Federal Reserve keeps on printing money. In 2008, when we had a financial crisis, when the financial system was under kind of attack because our banks did so much damage. That's when Federal Reserve just basically started doing something incredibly extraordinary that hasn't been done ever in history of monetary policy. It just started printing money and sending it to every central bank throughout the world.
Right.
Like, I actually looked at the listing of the banks that had gotten dollars. It was just for the American banks, we gave, by some estimates, $14 trillion. Some other estimates say $23 trillion. I think those are incredible, absolutely mind-boggling amounts of money that are sitting somewhere. Or where are they? Like to me, we can't have public health care, we can't spend on infrastructure, we don't have money to spend on essential things, but yet we have trillions and trillions of dollars to go to the
I think
Go ahead, buddy.
I think that's where wage compression would actually be very useful.
So let's transition into that. Let's transition into wage compression right now.
You've got this inflationary supply of money into things that aren't actually going to cause demand. Whereas wage compression would get the money down to people on the street. And I think that's what's important.
Can you explain? Can you explain the full theory behind wage compression? Like what you exactly mean by wage compression?
Okay, sure. I can. The idea of wage compression comes from. I mean, I live in South Africa, and we've gone through this transition that happened in the 90s from apartheid, kind of a very racist form of government, and we changed to a non-racial democracy. And I was a teenager when that happened, so very idealistic and optimistic about what was going to happen in this country. And yet, 20 years later, we're facing worse inequality now than what we were back then. And I started looking at why is this? Because surely with democracy and with freedom, we would have inequality getting less. And so I started looking into it, and then I saw some maybe kind of structural problems that we had in our economy, and some of it obviously comes from the structural adjustment program that the IMF has kind of forced on us, which has its own thing. But I think even without that, we would still have this growing inequality. Just it's the nature of the free market system.
So wait a second, IMF.
The players have changed.
Buddy, are you on IMF program? Are you? Like, do you need to?
Yes. So yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Well, you pretty much.
South Africa. Yes. Exactly. But
I've
if we
read
weren't on the IMF program, we would still have.
No, I've actually read some of the IMF. No, I've read some of the IMF proposals. I've actually read the points that they require countries to do, and that is, in my opinion, that was a killing of a country. It's like kicking someone who is dying to die faster. I would say,
Yeah.
So that's why I asked.
You're from Russia?
Right. Originally.
You said you're from Russia?
Right.
I mean, Russia is one of those countries that's
Russia is
but getting back to wage compression.
Go ahead, buddy.
What I noticed was that though the players have changed in the economy now, we've got this race-based empowerment system called BEE, which basically it's been good in a lot of ways, but it hasn't really filtered down to the general population. You've still got the same rules of the game, except the players have just changed. So you've still got the workers living in dire poverty, and you've got the guys at the top living in super luxury. So I started thinking about how we sort this problem out, and wage compression seemed like the logical thing to do. It's basically everybody getting together, the political, business, academic, and maybe even the religious leaders of the country getting together and deciding on setting a maximum ratio within each company that the boss can pay himself so many times more than the guy at the bottom. And the benefit to businesses would be that minimum wage would become unnecessary. And the benefit to workers is that if the company becomes successful, they would actually really start getting some good money.
Basically, like profit sharing, something along those lines.
It's kind of like that, except that it's involving the actual pay that people are getting. So, on a monthly basis. So it's not just share involving shares and stuff. That could be part of it as well. I think any kind of benefits that accrue from the company should be shared. Much.
And Buddy,
I like that idea. I've read.
It's mainly
would each company or industry have their own prorated share or ratio?
That's a good point. I think that economists need to discuss that and decide. If there are different sectors of the economy that need to have different ratios, and it doesn't need to be set in stone. I think the ratios can change according to what at any given time needs more attention. So if you need more incentive for entrepreneurs and for business leaders, if you find that they are not being stimulated enough, then the ratio can be adjusted. And on the other hand, if inequality is getting too great, it can be adjusted in the other way.
Right.
No, I think that's
in the same way that interest rates are adjusted.
Dina, what do you think?
I think. Well, I like the idea of wage compression. From what I understood, I actually proposed Buddy to call it wage ratio because compression has a bit of a negative connotation.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if I'm a worker and I hear wage compression, like to me, I think, oh, that is my wage. It's gonna go down, you know. But it's semantics basically, But yeah, I like his idea overall because it gives the money to workers who actually spend the money, and it does ensure. But if a company makes profit, some of that profit actually goes to the people who work to make it happen. It doesn't just accrue to the people on top. That, as Buddy mentioned in his article, ensure that they capture most of the gain, the profits. So yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I read your article and I liked it. Yes.
So I definitely understand the idea, and I saw your question in your frequently asked questions section, but wouldn't a CEO or entrepreneur who wants to start their own business actually have less of an incentive if they can make less money, or they have a cap on what they can make?
Steve Jobs paid himself.
That all depends.
It's true.
Buddy, I said Steve Jobs paid himself $1.
It's true.
Remember?
Oh wow, he did make a lot of money.
Yeah, he did, but isn't the entrepreneur interested in ensuring that that his company's workers more productive by giving them actually money?
Yeah. Alex, if you look into the benefits that you'll get from wage compression and the problems that we are facing right now, especially in South Africa, we're having these huge amount of strikes. We're losing hundreds of billions of rands because of the strikes. We're losing untold amounts of money just because our rating, ratings like Fitch, the agencies have downgraded us, so we have to pay more to borrow money as a country now. And the reasons that they gave is that we had social unrest and
Right.
all the inequality that's so. Apart from that, we've got huge amounts of crime, education that would which has been shown by the World Bank and UN studies that more equal societies have better levels of education. The benefits of a more equal society are just so great, and the thing that a lot of people in South Africa, a lot of the richer people in South Africa complain about, are all caused by inequality. So I think that it's going to have to be a trade-off for them between how many millions is enough, and compared to the lifestyle and a more safer society, a better functioning economy,
Yeah.
more demand, a better business environment. And the thing about wage compression is that it's limiting the income of the executive. If the company is doing very well, which it has far more chance of doing in an environment with wage compression, they will actually, there's no limit on their salary. It's just as long as they're paying their workers a certain ratio of what they earn, they can keep putting the salary up as much money as they make.
Buddy, what you just described, wage compression, some of the startups in Silicon Valley, are you aware of Silicon Valley? A lot of
where's Silicon Valley?
Yeah, a lot of
it's in California.
Startups. California, yeah. Alex, can you explain what is Silicon Valley?
Sure. Silicon Valley is pretty much the quintessence of startups in California.
I know.
Yeah, okay.
Right. Some of the startups actually experimented with that, and it worked pretty good. They basically said, well, our company makes that much money, so if it's gonna do better, you're gonna get more money. If it's gonna do worse, then your salary is gonna decrease, and it worked pretty well because people were incentivized and worked harder. Yes. So I think that's a very good idea. My only question is that what about the companies where workers don't have high skills, like janitors? What about janitors, restaurant servers?
Sorry, where workers?
No, I'm saying what about the sectors where workers don't have high skills, basically like janitors, restaurant workers, where basically they're easily interchangeable. Like their work is not going to make the company that makes that much money. Alex, do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
So,
yeah.
Like these people still need a living wage, but the company can say, your value in the company is so low that, do you understand what I'm kind of trying to say? Like,
I understand exactly what you're saying. I think
we can't all have high education,
Yeah, that's the great thing about wage compression. This lie that's because you don't have skill that your job is not worth a certain amount. It's just it's really not true. Those jobs that people do are very valuable to the companies, and the reason why they pay so little is because there's a lot of demand. There's a lot of supply for labor, and that's the that's like really the nub of the problem that we're facing is that people are viewing labor as this commodity that you can supply and demand, but it doesn't really make sense if you look at it, because if we follow that logic, you're going to find that labor will just get cheaper and cheaper, and and that will lead to less and less jobs, because you'll have less and less employees. As the money goes up the pyramid, you'll find that there are less people that can employ other people. So we're going to get more joblessness, and that's going to lead to even more desperation and more people willing to sell themselves, their work for less. So the whole idea of labor being supply and demand doesn't make sense at all. Even if we were educated and we were all university graduates, we would still need people to do those unskilled jobs, and there would still be a demand for jobs and a supply of labor. So at what point do you say, well, you as a person are adding a certain amount of value to the company that's beyond what your market, what competitiveness is. We've got to decouple this the idea of the concept of labor from the market, because unless we do that, we're just going to, whole economy is just going to go backwards.
I agree. So how exactly wage compression decide how much money a worker is worth? Did you hear me?
Say that again?
I said, how does wage compression, how it will decide how much money a worker is worth? Because right now, like for example in America, we have, which I do not agree with it, I think teachers sometimes do much more value than, but how does the wage compression decide that, let's just say, a janitor in the company is worth this much?
Yeah.
In comparison with,
well,
like,
it would be according to the how much. Yeah. If a company was doing really well, there's a certain amount of money that would go to salaries, and that includes the CEO, the executives, and the middle management and the workers. And what the lowest paid workers' salaries will be determined by the amount of money that the company is making, and the amount of money that's being paid in gross wages. So if you're an unskilled worker in a very profitable company, you will be paid more than unskilled workers working in a not so profitable company.
No, I think so. Alex?
Yeah.
Before, I just want to say something about debt ceiling, if you don't mind.
Okay, sure.
I largely agree with everything Buddy said. I think his idea of wage compression is a great idea, and it really addresses the very important factor with the fact that right now most of companies' profit is going to someone on top rather than being distributed more equally on the bottom. And since the people on the bottom are the people who spend the most, it's taken the spending power out of them and an economy stagnates.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to say something about debt ceiling because that was one of the topics. In America, America prints its own money. Most of our debts are denominated in US dollar. So in reality, we do not have a constraint on how much money we spend. What we do have is the political problem. What we do have is this money can be spent on people, this money can be given to people, this money can be spent on creating jobs for people that then use those wages to buy products, thus ensuring the economy growth. All those money can be spent on transferring them to the banks, to the military, to the special interests. So right now, we really do not have the problem of spending. We have the problem of the fact that the money are being taken from the productive forces and given to the unproductive forces. And this is called capitalism. When in reality, it's really not capitalism. It's socialism for the 1%, and it's Wild West capitalism for the rest of us that are scrambling to survive. So we really do not have debt ceiling. Any country that prints its own money does not have debt ceiling. What it does have is a problem where those money are going. So our money right now are not going to create jobs, are not going to ensure that people have better education to compete. It's going to unproductive financial speculation, military spending, bases around the world. So basically, it's a political problem. It's not an economical problem. I'm sorry, Buddy. I just wanted to
No, it's true. The thing is, if your ideology is capitalism, then surely you would agree with sharing capital to people so that they can become better capitalists. It's the idea that the capitalism would mean monopolizing everything, to 1%. That actually is not capitalism because you're not sharing that capitalism amongst the people. So it's actually the opposite of capitalism. If you really believe in capitalism, then you would have to share capital amongst people so that they can become capitalists.
Right. So, Buddy, thinking. Go ahead, Dina. I had a question that's kind of off topic, so go ahead.
No, I just basically wanted to say that I think the conclusion kind of mine by this conversation, if there is more money on the hands of people who actually spend them, the economy is much better.
Right.
The money accumulates on top, the economy is going to stagnate. Right. So we agreed on this.
It's the people that create jobs. It's the people that invest. People will invest that money on education, on other, on business opportunities. And that's what a lot of people don't see is that it's not just about spending. It's also about investment and allowing people to invest. And if people don't have capital, they can't invest.
Right. And how would wage compression?
Wage compression for me.
Sorry, you can go ahead and say what you're saying.
Yeah, for me, wage compression will get that capital to the broader population, so that they can invest in jobs and businesses in the areas, education, healthcare, that kind of stuff.
So then, how do you think wage compression ties into inflation?
Well, wage compression is a way of regulating the price of goods without creating inflation, because you're not increasing the supply of money when you implement wage compression.
Right.
You're getting money to the population, but you're not increasing the supply of money, so there's no inflation. Right? You will get price rises because as the population has more money to spend, the things that they can spend money on will become more expensive.
Right.
But it will be a more realistic kind of price rise than what's happening at the moment. Where you've got this non-inflation, but no price rises, but there's so much inflation happening, and yet there's no price rise.
Mm.
No, there is actually.
And the value of currency is kind of usually increasing.
When you debase the currency, when you print money, you debase your currency, so automatically your currency, there is an inflation. Because you destroy the value of the currency. The more currency is there.
But you can have inflation without price rising, which is what's happening in America.
Right.
You've got this inflation, and also in South Africa to this thing. But because people don't have, the money's not getting back to the people, you're not seeing price rises to the same extent.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that.
And I have one more question, Buddy.
I mean, inflation can be quite.
Go ahead, continue with inflation.
Can be quite useful. I mean, throughout the history of the world, countries have used inflation to make the debt that they owe worth less. So it actually can be a very useful thing. It's just you've got to manage it so that it doesn't become hyperinflation. That's the trick.
Right. I have another question. So, does the wage compression theory have any effect on, I guess, fringe benefits such as stock rights or flex spending accounts or 401k contribution? Does it affect anything like that?
On stock? Say that again?
So, I mean, thinking about American jobs, you have indirect, or you have other benefits, not just your salary. So you can have stock options. You can have your employer contribute to your 401k. You can have a flex spending account. Does the compression theory have taken into account any decrease in these benefits?
I think that wage compression should involve all the benefits that employees get, including the executives. So if an executive is getting a certain amount of stock shares as part of his remuneration, that's the value of those shares should be taken into account. When working out the ratio, what his employees would get, so that there are no loopholes.
But isn't there kind of a flaw with that? Because if you have stock options, yes, they're worth money, but that's not liquid money. So you would have to decrease the CEO's or executives' liquid cash compensation while the liquidity of a lower end employee is going up. So you may have the Steve Jobs $1 salary and a lot of stock options, but if that person's not Steve Jobs and they don't have savings, they're not going to be able to live off the money they get.
But at the point that they sell the stock option, it's going to be worth a certain amount of money, and when they sell those options and get that money, that should be taken into account as to how much money he's making at year.
Right, I agree with that, but what happens when the person doesn't sell their stock options for 4 or 5 years? What money are they living off of?
That's a good point. That's something that's I think we need to look into.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think overall, though, I kind of agree. Those are the details about stock options, and I mean they're important details, but they're details. I think that the larger premise of the fact that right now there's a lot of inequality everywhere, especially the difference between a CEO and a worker is so big that it's just creating so many problems. like Buddy said. And I agree with it. And if you look at Finland, if you look at countries that have um, lower rates of inequality, they're much more productive. The people are better off. There is less crime. So I think this is probably a system that we should be thinking about emulating, where there is a more equal sharing of profits, where and it goes to the people that will actually use this money rather than speculate with them.
And the great thing about wage compression is that it's kind of an alternative to the system that we have at the moment of taxation on income as a way of distributing wealth, because taxation is basically it's not really an efficient model, because you've got this middleman that's the government between the rich and the poor, and that they're not actually that great at delivering benefits to the people.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one thing. The other thing is that it creates, taxation on welfare creates this kind of culture of dependency, whereas if you're getting the money to people for the people that are working for their jobs are actually getting paid properly for it, and they're spending that money to the community. It's just a much more healthy way of distributing wealth in welfare. And also, what happens, what we find happening here, especially in South Africa, is if you're going to tax the very rich, they're just going to pay themselves more, and in order to do that, they have to pay their workers less. So wage compression is an alternative to that system of taxation, and it will mean less taxation because there will be less need for welfare, so less need for taxes.
Yeah, and I also think that if people will spend their money into their community, it's people who will decide how to spend their money instead of a government deciding where it's going to go, because we already seen where the government spent it on.
Exactly.
Banks, like I said, banks, right? Taxpayers' money. I mean, a person would rather spend it on their child's education or buying goods and services. Like Buddy said. No, I totally agree. I think an individual can make a much better decision where to spend his money than a government.
And I mean, on a different note, we've got this system of privatization in South Africa, and we have an American company distributing our welfare grants in South Africa. They do that for a fee of about $4 billion a year. So $4 billion is going out the country every year in order to distribute welfare to our very poorest people. That doesn't make sense to
me. Yeah.
And I'm sorry, Alex, there's another thing. I am really happy with Vonvo because I think that lets us people that live in our present economy discuss things as it is. And that makes people actually what's really going on instead of watching some people on CNN or Fox News talk about something that, that sometimes is just a lie, actually.
Yeah.
I think that kind of makes younger people like me, Buddy, I think you're young, to just participate in this and just think like we also have a voice.
Yeah.
And it's very important. So thank you guys. That's a great platform.
Thank you. Thank you for participating, and I invite you back to participate whenever you'd like. And it was a good.
Well, me and Buddy are friends on Facebook now, so
yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So it's good conversation, guys. Thank you.
Thanks for having this discussion.
Buddy, your theory is definitely very interesting, and hopefully we'll see you on here again and hear more about it as well as your other theories.
Thank you, guys. I'll be, I'm connected to you, so I'm checking out your conversation.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. I'll speak to you guys soon.
I'll talk to you later, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.